Located in northwest Georgia, on the western edge of Lookout Mountain, sits Cloudland Canyon, one of Georgia's largest state parks at 3,538 acres. Immediately after you turn in from Highway 136, you'll find the Visitor Center. From there, the road splits, with one direction taking you to the West Rim and the other taking you to the East Rim. The West Rim consists only of lodging, from cottages to RV and tent camping and backcountry camping. The West Rim's main RV and tent campground boasts 48 sites, with 4 of those designated as camp host sites. The sites are fairly spacious, with each having water and electric, picnic tables, a grill, and a fire pit. There are 2 bathhouses within the West Rim campground, containing a washer and dryer unit, showers, and toilets. Heading to the East Rim is where you'll find everything else the park has to offer, from the Interpretive Center, the Overlook Trail along with numerous trailheads, the disc golf course, observation deck, and fishing pond. The East Rim campground is much more open, unlike the West Rim, which is very wooded with a little more privacy between neighbors. The East Rim campground includes 1 bathhouse. However, it is much closer to many of the activities within the park. One of the highlights of this area is its proximity to the main overlook. This viewing spot offers stunning views of the gorge that runs through the state park. This is also where you can pick up many of the trails that take you around the top and through the bottom of the gorge. Cloudland Canyon has 6 trails within the main park, accessible from both the East Rim or the West Rim, totaling about 17 miles. If you are in the West Rim campground, you only have access to the West Rim Loop Trail, which begins directly across from the first bathhouse when traveling on the one-way road. Once you get to the main trail, you can head one direction to the East Rim, where you can pick up the other trails. The other direction takes you on the West Rim Loop. The West Rim Loop Trail is 5 miles all around, but if your beginning and end point is the West Rim campground, the loop is about 4 miles. Within less than a quarter mile, you'll find an outcropping of rocks, and should you choose to walk out over them, you'll have a clear view of the East Rim overlook that we saw from the other side of the gorge. If your nerves get the best of you, don't worry. There are more overlooks coming up that have proper viewing areas with safety fences. I took the loop in a clockwise direction, and at about 0.7 miles into the loop is where you'll come across the trail connector for the walk-in campground. There is of course a drive-up area to access these, but this will be their connection to the West Rim Loop Trail. At the 1.7 mile mark from the starting point at the campground, you reach a sort of an apex to the loop. As you can see on the map, from this point to almost all the way back to where the loop connects back to a single trail, you'll be at the edge of this mountaintop, with spectacular views along the entire way. .5 miles from our starting point, you come across the trail connector for some cabins. Just a few steps further and you reach another binocular viewing spot from our trail map. As you finish the loop part of the trail, you're treated to one of the last views across the gorge to the east rim. With nothing except the sound of the wind and the river below in the gorge, it's truly an amazing spot to stop and take it all in. Eventually, you find your way back to the blue label connector trail that heads back to the West Rim campground, unless you are continuing on to the East Rim, in which case you have another half-mile walk to the end of the trail. If you're staying in the West Rim campground, it's less than a 5-minute walk from that earlier mentioned bathhouse to the closest overlook where you might be able to catch a sunrise on the rocks overlooking the gorge. Our next trail takes us from the rim of the gorge straight down to the bottom of it. Sitton's Gulch Trail technically requires you to start on the Waterfalls Trail. The Waterfalls Trail takes you down some stairs. A lot of stairs. 600 steps on top of the sections of dirt and rock trail that take you a half mile to the first falls, and then another half mile to the second falls. These falls are not the easiest to get to as you are walking down the cliff edge of the gorge, but once reached, your efforts will be rewarded. After Hemlock Falls, you can begin the official start to Sitton's Gulch Trail. The trail starts off with a wooden bridge with metal grate floor, giving you a view of the river crossing below your feet. Most of this remaining 4 miles of round-trip trail will have you walking next to the river, with constant views of the flowing waters over the boulder-strewn gorge floor and the steep mountain walls on either side. Towards the end of the trail, it does flatten out and move away from the river, at which point you'll find yourself surrounded by trees until eventually coming to the end of the trail, which has a parking lot. Toward the end of the return hike, I stopped quickly to enjoy the unnamed waterfall along the trail, which is located close to the official trailhead at the bridge crossing. Then the steep 1-mile climb back up the mountainside cliff to the top of the ridge ends the hike. At the top, you can look over the gorge and have the opportunity to visualize the hike you just ventured on across the bottom. Cloudland Canyon offers plenty to do within the park, but for those that are on an extended stay or enjoy activities outside of their temporary home, Cloudland Canyon is only 30 minutes from Chattanooga, which puts you a short drive from almost limitless outside day trips. One of the more popular, albeit touristy attractions is Rock City. This attraction has pathways that take you through massive rock formations. It includes paths, bridges, including a swinging bridge, squeezes between rocks, tunnels, and caves. There are gardens throughout with hundreds of plant species. The highlight is when you get to the mountain edge, and on a clear day, we'll have a view of 7 different states. However, even on this visit, my first ever on a rainy, foggy day, it was a different, but somehow even more amazing experience to see it under those conditions. Next up is Ruby Falls. This activity brings you down 260 feet into the mountain in a glass front elevator to a cave system. The guided tour takes you on an hour to hour-and-a-half walk that brings you a little less than a half-mile in and another approximate half-mile back to the elevator. Throughout the tour, you'll be shown different formations in the rocks and explained how the cave system was discovered. The highlight for many is the end of the path inward, where Ruby Falls, the tallest cave waterfall open to the public in the United States, pours into the open cavern. The Incline Railway is a short but fun way to travel to the top or bottom of Lookout Mountain. It's basically a railway car with angled seating that moves by means of a counterweighted cable. It's a way to see how workers of the past used to travel up and down the mountain. Just down the street from the top of the Incline Railway is Chickamauga and Chattanooga National Military Park, a National Historic Site. It is the site of an 1863 battle between Union and Confederate forces to gain control of Chattanooga. There are signs throughout the park that talk about the troops and the battle that was fought there, an important stop for anyone interested in Civil War history. Another attraction I love, which is in a different location about 40 minutes from Cloudland Canyon, is the Tennessee Valley Railroad, which runs numerous train rides around Chattanooga and Hiawassee. The Missionary Ridge Local is the shortest and most common ride, and it uses both diesel and steam locomotives on this run. Given that choice, here's my preference. One of the few highlights is going through the pre-Civil War tunnel. Reaching the end of the 15-minute, 3-mile trip out, another highlight is getting the historic turntable demonstration as they spin the giant locomotive around for the return trip.
Now, this turntable you're looking at here was constructed in 1916 by the American Bridge and Iron Company in Ambridge, Pennsylvania, and it was used by the Central of Georgia Railroad in Macon, Georgia at their locomotive backstop. That is up until 1925 when they moved it to Cedartown, Georgia, where it was used at the end of a branch line. Purchased by one of our co-founders here at museum, Paul Merriman, in the early 60s for $5,000 residual tax, plus 12 years under full power, and has been operating both on mainline and on and off, as well as here at the museum ever since. Now, this locomotive is a 282. That means it has 2 small pilot holes in the front, 8 large driving holes in the middle, and 2 trailing holes under the cabin firebox. This is the very first 282.
The other trip I've done with the Tennessee Valley Railroad is the Hiawassee Loop. This is a bit more of a drive from Cloudland Canyon at about an hour and a half to the pickup location.
Alright, got you checked in. Y'all are coach. So have a seat in the front part of car number 3. This is car 4 right here. Go all the way through there.
This longer 5-hour trip takes you on a 50-mile round-trip tour through the Hiawassee River Gorge. Early on the ride, you cross a very narrow bridge over the Hiawassee River. From this point, much of the trip follows alongside the river. Eventually you climb higher up the mountain and away from the river. At the top, you will experience the Hiawassee Loop, which is where the tracks cross over themselves as you circle around to gain elevation. Shortly after, the train stops as the locomotive switches to the other side of the train for the descent back home. You'll once again go around the loop. If you're not one to venture away from your campground, even on extended stays, back home at Cloudland Canyon, there is still plenty to keep you busy outside of just the hikes. For those with children, they have an interpretive center that has a wealth of information and activities for the kids. There are displays of animals and artifacts that can be looked at, some that can be handled. There are hands-on activities for learning. They have books, posters, and other written material that have all kinds of information related to nature. There are sessions with a park ranger that will have specific topics taught, along with crafts related to that subject. Cloudland Canyon features its own 18-hole disc golf course. The course can be found from a connector road at the east rim side of the park. This road also takes you to the observation deck, fishing pond, and also acts as a 2-mile backcountry trail, along with the Cloudland Connector Trail, which gives further access to 21 other multi-use trails for hiking, biking, and horseback. That sums up some of the highlights of this amazing state park. Thanks for coming along, and feel free to share anything I missed in my overview of the park.